For the last 50 years, a golden rule of the universe dictated that computing gets cheaper, faster, and smaller. If cars evolved like hard drives, a Ferrari would cost a nickel and run on a thimble of gas. So why is it that when you went to upgrade your computer's memory recently, the price tag looked like a ransom note? The golden era of dirt-cheap storage is dead, and the culprits are hiding in plain sight. To understand why you are suddenly paying a premium to hoard your digital life, we have to look at the lie we have all been collectively sold since 1965. Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel, famously predicted that the number of transistors on a microchip would double every 2 years, predictably halving the cost of computing power. In the storage world, a similar principle called Kreider's law projected that magnetic disk area storage density would double annually. For decades, the tech industry treated these observations not as economic trends, but as absolute physical laws, much like gravity or thermodynamics. And for a while, the math checked out beautifully. In 1981, a single gigabyte of storage would have set you back roughly $500,000 and required a forklift to move into your office. By 2010, that exact same gigabyte cost about 10 cents and fit on a piece of silicon the size of a fingernail. We got so used to this terrifyingly steep deflationary curve that we started taking infinite, free storage for granted. We assumed that by the time we reached the mid-2020s, a terabyte of memory would cost roughly the same as a slightly bruised banana. But then, the curve broke entirely. Between late 2023 and the end of 2024, the wholesale price of NAND flash memory, the microscopic silicon grid inside your solid-state drives and smartphones, surged by over 50% in just a few short months. DRAM, the volatile memory that lets your computer keep 40 browser tabs open while actively complaining about being tired, followed the exact same brutal upward trajectory. We hit a wall, not just of pure economics, but of basic atomic physics, and the giant corporations holding the monopoly on memory decided they were no longer going to subsidize our insatiable, careless appetite for data. You see, making memory chips is not like stamping out license plates or injecting plastic into a mold. It is arguably the most complex and unforgiving manufacturing process in human history. To fabricate a modern NAND memory chip, you have to precisely stack microscopic layers of silicon on top of each other, sometimes over 230 layers deep, etching three-dimensional patterns into them that are literally measured in individual atoms. The lithography machines required to pull off this dark magic, known as extreme ultraviolet systems built exclusively by a Dutch company called ASML, cost upwards of $200 million apiece. The optics inside these machines are polished so perfectly smooth that if you expanded their mirrors to the size of the Earth, the tallest mountain on the surface would be barely a millimeter high. As we desperately try to cram more data into the exact same physical footprint, the research and development costs have skyrocketed exponentially. The pristine fabrication plants that house these machines cost upwards of $20 billion just to break ground, consuming enough electricity to power a medium-sized city and millions of gallons of ultra-pure water a day. When you are spending the gross domestic product of a small island nation just to build a single factory, you can no longer afford to sell the output for pennies. But physics and capital expenditure are only part of the story. The real suspense comes from a classic tale of corporate survival and artificial scarcity. In 2022 and early 2023, the global memory market actually crashed. People stopped buying new laptops and phones after the pandemic spending boom, leaving manufacturers with mountains of unsold inventory rotting in warehouses. Prices cratered. The big three memory manufacturers, Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, who collectively control over 95% of the global market, were bleeding billions of dollars a quarter. So, they did what any rational, slightly cynical oligopoly does in a crisis. They panicked, pulled the plug on the assembly lines, and deliberately starved the market. They slashed global production by up to 30%. If you want to know how well this brutal tactic worked, and frankly if you want to help me survive the algorithm, subscribe to this almost dead channel because it is the only thing keeping the lights on. Anyway, by artificially restricting the supply of silicon wafers, these three companies successfully engineered a massive, structural price rebound. They realized that in a world utterly addicted to data, they held all the leverage. Humanity is currently producing about 3.5 quintillion bytes of data every single day. Every text message, every streaming movie, every poorly framed photograph of your lunch has to physically live on a server somewhere. The demand for storage is perfectly inelastic. We literally cannot stop consuming it. And that brings us to the actual, undeniable reason your hard drives and memory sticks are getting more expensive every year: the voracious, world-eating monster known as artificial intelligence. When large language models and their silicon-brained cousins exploded into the mainstream, they completely rewired the global semiconductor supply chain almost overnight. Artificial intelligence does not just need massive amounts of raw computing power, it requires a very specific, incredibly expensive type of memory called high-bandwidth memory, or HBM. Training an AI model requires shuffling petabytes of data in and out of processors at light speed. Standard memory chips simply cannot handle the traffic, they create a bottleneck. HBM solves this by vertically stacking DRAM chips and piercing them with thousands of microscopic copper wires, a manufacturing process so difficult that the defect rates are wildly high and the production time takes months. Because HBM is incredibly profitable, often selling for 5 to 6 times the price of standard memory, Samsung and SK Hynix took a look at their limited factory space, stopped making the cheap consumer drives you want for your gaming rig, and pivoted aggressively to churning out AI memory for megacorporations like Nvidia and Microsoft. The server farms that run AI are black holes for silicon. A single high-end AI server rack can contain terabytes of this ultra-expensive HBM and petabytes of enterprise-grade solid-state storage. Consumer storage is now just an afterthought, a low-margin byproduct of a supply chain that has been entirely hijacked by the multi-trillion-dollar artificial intelligence arms race. You are paying more for your hard drive because you are actively bidding for factory space against the most highly capitalized tech conglomerates in human history, and spoiler alert, you are losing spectacularly. We have officially reached the era where Moore's law is running out of steam, replaced by the grim reality of supply constraints, corporate monopolies, and the sheer thermodynamic cost of building an artificial brain. We are quite literally running out of atomic space on a silicon wafer to make things any cheaper. But here is one final, strangely terrifying fact to put our modern, hyper-expensive data obsession into perspective. Despite all this incredibly advanced, atom-perfect engineering and trillions of dollars in investment, our digital storage is shockingly fragile. If civilization collapsed tomorrow and the power grids went permanently dark, those expensive solid-state drives would slowly leak their trapped electrons and erase themselves completely in a matter of decades. Magnetic hard drives would demagnetize and degrade in roughly the same timeframe. The most durable, long-lasting storage medium currently in widespread use by major financial institutions and tech giants for long-term data archiving is not some futuristic quantum crystal or an indestructible titanium drive, it is magnetic tape. Yes, the exact same underlying analog technology that powered cassette tapes and VCRs in the 1970s. In fact, in late 2020, IBM and Fujifilm set a global world record by cramming a staggering 580 terabytes of data onto a single cartridge of magnetic tape using engineered strontium ferrite particles. The cutting edge of human knowledge, the ultimate backup of all our grand AI achievements, internet history, and cloud infrastructure, is not floating in the ether. It is ultimately being spooled onto literal plastic ribbons, spinning slowly in cold, dark, subterranean rooms, just waiting for the end of the world.